I hope everyone had a good break, and we can resume with our session 4, the last for today.
Hello.
Hi, Jacob. Hi. So Veronica is going to be chairing the session. Just before we start, I wanted to mention to everyone that I have posted in the chat the menti.com link. If you can go there using the 2 codes that I posted, you can answer question 1 and 2. The question 1 is basically what are the main problems facing maritime archaeology within the climate emergency? And question 2 is what are the tools to use for the future? It will create a word cloud of what our answers and opinions are, which we can see and discuss at the end. But for now, I'll just hand it over to Veronica for session 4.
So thank you for that, Katerina. This session is about maritime traditions and evidence of local knowledge. And our first speaker is Jacob Bow, who is from the Archipelago network. That's correct. And he'll be talking about Cycladic maritime trades. So the floor is yours, Jacob.
Thank you. Thanks, Veronica and Katerina, for it's good to present in such good company after these last panels. And yeah, I think mine is a project and presentation that speaks directly also to Katerina's, for those of you that, yeah, from this morning. Now, let me just screen share. Can you see my screen? Yes. Great. Yes, so the project I'm presenting today, I thought I'd actually start by way of presenting a little bit the context for the research that we've been doing in the Cyclades, which is an island group in the South Aegean of Greece. The organization which I run with a group of colleagues is called Archipelago Network, and I'll start with it's an audiovisual heritage and project focused around documenting material knowledge in the region. So I'm going to start with a very brief video, silent video, which I hope plays. So what you just saw is a very short excerpt from actually home movies shot by a father of a family in Syros in the mid 1960s, it was a bit of material which we discovered several years ago on Syros, and it led us to begin thinking about all the forms of audiovisual heritage, so films, videotapes, audio reels, cassettes, photography, and the ways in which they provide very valuable tangible traces and evidence for the different kinds of culture and knowledge specific to the region. And so in a way, the basis for our organization initiative is collecting, preserving, and interpreting these kinds of materials from Syros in the region. And trying through this research and knowledge production to leverage the traditions and resources that already exist in this group of islands and draw from them best practices, both for the region and beyond. We work on a couple of different levels. One is the archival one, which really just means going door to door and archiving, digitizing private collections of material that up until this point hadn't been public or documented, putting them on our online open access platform, and then engaging with researchers mostly from different kind of public humanities fields, but also the arts, and giving them those materials to work with, as well as a public program on the islands. So some of our goals, which some we've already been hearing about and discussing in past panels, but I think perhaps what we focus on most is really this, both the power and the fragility and the endangered character of these audiovisual materials as a means of documenting. So our collections so far include topics such as boat building, plant biodiversity, ceramics, and now maritime trades, which I wanted to present to you a bit more in detail today. This here, some of you may be very familiar with this and others not so much, is the Cyclades, and of these islands, 5 of them are the ones which are the focus of this specific project. So Syros, if you can see my cursor, Paros, Kufoniskia, Amorgo, and Santorini. It's a group of islands which for millennia, if not centuries, have been host to traditional wooden boat building, fishing, small-scale fishing in particular, and cargo transport as a means of transporting primary production and other goods throughout the region and far beyond. The documentation methods, which took place over several months of fieldwork, included photography, video interviews, archival research, and digitization and photogrammetry. And the dissemination advocacy of these materials seeks, on the one hand, to contribute to broader public awareness, which is very much needed at this point for these trades. And also the next phase will be proposing solutions and case studies for their continued existence. In keeping with the theme of this symposium, I wanted to just give you sort of a bit of a show and tell of this field work through images, while also referencing some of the knowledge around climate and trade that these specific crafts evidenced, and that this is all based on extensive interviews and oral histories, which we conducted with over 15 boat builders, fishermen, and cargo captains. So yeah, I'll just be kind of speaking in parallel to the images. This here is in the island of Syros. It's documentation of a collection of tools and molds, which are basically the ways in which a boat builder shapes specific aspects of and elements of boats themselves. On the left, you see ruler. On the right, these are tools which are used to create specific angles that then shape some of the main frames of boats. One of the things that struck us about this specific collection was the way in which the disappearance of traditional boat building, which Katerina spoke about earlier, is in fact related to the disappearance of an entire network of related trades, from the cotton rope needed for caulking, which is the way in which you maintain the sort of the main beams of a boat over time, are also disappearing as a result of there not being as much of a need. The same thing goes for metalworking and tools. So here you can see these tools were actually all made in Syros, and that is now no longer the case. The metal workshops are closing, and these tools are now pre-ordered and bought from various other countries. We also documented not only the specific boat building tools and craft workshops, but the general infrastructure, which enables boats. In this case, you see a slipway, both a traditional one on your left and then a concrete one on your right, which is how boats are hauled in and out on a yearly basis for maintenance. Using drone photography, we created photo orthomosaics of each of the boatyards, which were then delivered to the boat building communities and the boatyards for any further use, as well as photogrammetry of selected tools, which were chosen in consultation with the boat builders themselves. So this here, yeah, just a short selection of the material which we collected and produced and also digitized in this case. Here's some quite rare photographs of fishermen in Syros in the 1910s, taken by a British consul who was posted there. And now on the island of Kufonisi, here you see the old boatyard, which was closed recently. And so we went to document both the reasons for its closure and also its reestablishment in a new next door bay here. And here you see the new boatyard, temporary boatyard in action. Part of the project was also, as a kind of an awareness raising project, does have to do also with portraiture and portrait photography of specific individuals and people. So here you see a cargo captain and fisherman from Kufonisi, Captain Costas. And again, we interweave that contemporary documentation with this more archival material, which was sourced in this case from the Fishers Association of the island. I will try and just go through this more as a visual aid because I have a couple notes I wanted to address before my time is up. But here you see material from Amorgos, in this case from Paros. Something we also were working with was documenting traditional and symbolic knowledge. So things like from songs to superstitions to feasts, the ways in which, for example, this fisherman from Paros told us that his father would only go out to fish when a certain member of the community who was related to a patron saint would tell him that it was okay to go. And that was how he learned also to begin fishing. So these are things that obviously kind of change and evolve and sometimes get lost over time. Here's a boat builder from Paros, who was also describing the deep knowledge of forestry. And actually, to speak to Katerina's point, before I think that these traditional practices of wooden boat building were in ways quite in harmony with the environment, because these people knew that the forest was essentially a source of income, and so they would harvest only at specific times of year and only in specific quantities. All things which I think are we need to reevaluate and reincorporate into today and the future. Here we arrive at Santorini, the documentation of a set of very extensive set of tools from a boat builder, as well as these on the right. You can see these are actually, each of these correspond to an individual boat measurements and directions for how to construct them are on that piece of wood there. Mindful of time, I will see what of this material I can show you. Perhaps I'll skip over to a brief clip here. Yeah, this is an excerpt from a fishing expedition which we conducted video documentation with the fishers themselves, in a collaborative ethnographic sort of way. And on a concluding note, I wanted to mention a few methodological things. One, our archival workflow, which goes from identifying a specific archive to assessing it, clearing the rights to it, digitizing it, and then doing all of the kind of back-end work to make sure that the metadata and information regarding it is correct and compatible with the repository we use. This is an example of the discussion guide for interviews which we conducted so it was divided by section and created with a steering committee with various different representatives from, both naval architects and marine archaeologists. So gives you a sense of how the conversations went. Each of these ended up in a kind of 2-hour unstructured conversation, which will then be edited into a video. another thing we work on a lot is the collaborative archival dimension of creating agreements that govern how the material we collect is used in an open access framework. So that's an example of this, as well as the types of copyright assessment we do to determine whether and when a material needs to, we need to enter into an agreement with specific material, or if it's in the public domain. We are working on next steps, including an ICOMOS heritage alert for boat building in the Aegean and Greece in general, actually, presenting the material from this fieldwork, as well as in the future, a case study on how to reactivate a mixed-use boatyard, so one that functions both as a boatyard and as a museum and training center in the Cyclades. I will end here, hopefully leave a couple moments for questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Jacob. Very interesting presentation. I'm very happy that you introduced a topic like this, because I think it will flow really well with the next session papers. I am going to open the floor first for our audience. Does anyone have any questions? No?
Yeah, I just had a quick one. It's okay.
Yeah.
No, I just was curious how receptive the like the fishermen that you were working with and accompanying were. I know that with archaeology and fishing, sometimes it's kind of like a big clash, but I was just curious how easy that relationship was formed. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge amount of, the field work is really only one part of the, before we started the project, we mapped on each of the islands, different stakeholders in the process. And whenever we, say to go to Paros and, for example, fish to film that scene that you saw, we were recommended by a fisherman from Siros who was very close friends with this other fisherman and said, when you go, you speak to this guy and so on and so forth. So it's really a process of both, I think, building trust and one that took built on a lot of work we've done in the past. So given that trust, I think there was a real openness and an interest. It's obviously very far from their daily concerns, and I think that's something that's interesting to, I think they're working more very much in the realm of kind of day-to-day concerns of overfishing and the prices of gas and materials and things like this. But we part of the end result of this project will then be presented in these spaces and places. So we hope that kind of giving back as well to and with the people that we created the material with will actually only be the start of a discussion. But yeah, to speak to your question, it's really it's an ongoing process, and it's never it's never straightforward. So
Thanks. I'm curious.
Do you want to do a follow-up, Adrian, or were you satisfied with the answer?
No, that's kind of about how I expected it to be. No, it's really kind of a complicated and ongoing thing. So I was just curious if it was kind of a similar experience with him, because I've also had something similar. Right now I'm in Poland, and it's kind of a same thing where it's a trust building exercise through time, basically. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, because I was thinking that also, like, I also do some ethnography, and of course it's limited because I did not train as an ethnographer, but I work with ethnographers, and they take years to build that relationship. So it really is, in my case, I really do prefer to work with them so that they can sort of like take me by the hand and support me when I do my questions. And I think that is a failure perhaps of our degrees, that we don't have that kind of experience or background included in our studies, but it is very, very important to build that trust for sure. Okay, so I have one question by Jessica Vandenbrick. Do you want to open the mic, or is it okay if I just read it? Jessica? Okay, I can read it. Okay, so do you look at correlations to antiquity at all? I'm specifically thinking of the frescoes of Akrotiri that might be of interest, especially the ones that have to do with fishing customs, which link the culture there to regions across the Mediterranean?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. It's I mean, to speak, what's interesting about it, I think, is as you're mentioning, these kind of local or trans-Mediterranean connections with different fishing customs. It's not something we purposefully have a very specific kind of temporal focus for our fieldwork and work, which is defined by the media that we preserve and use. So basically, we're working from the early 20th century, from like the invention of photography and the use of photography broadly in the region up until today. So I think it would be an interesting link, but we also realize we're also a small team, and we have to really draw the line somewhere. So perhaps it would be a subject for future research collaboration with archaeologists. Yeah.
And we have one more question from Elena Perez-Alvaro. She doesn't have a mic. Sorry, Elena. Great presentation. I have a question for Jacob. You mentioned art was involved, but I didn't understand exactly how. Could you go over that again, please?
Yeah, it's a part of, we didn't address it in this presentation, but it's a part of how we activate the archive. Afterward, we think that art has a potential to communicate ideas that might be even technical or sort of specific to a much broader audience, to sort of things like film, sound recording, etc. So the art component of it has to do with the residency, where we invite artists and scholars to create new work based on the material that you saw, which was just kind of rough archival work. So it's a second phase after what you saw.
Okay. Does anyone have any other question? No? Well, I do have a question. I think I have a minute that I can use. You mentioned that in the interviews you had created the sort of the structure of the interviews with the team. Can you explain a little bit more of how was that? How did you put together that team? How did it make sense to you guys to do it that way?
Yeah, it's something, because it's our projects are thematic. We don't pretend to be able to be specialists in everything from ceramics to geology to maritime trades. And so at the beginning of the project, we assembled a committee. Actually, Caterina is one of the members, joined by Kostas Damianidis, who's a naval architect, and Maurizio Buriello, who is an ethnographer and boat builder. So we, based on our kind of extended network, we tried to draw on a diversity of perspectives, and then we have kind of a process of regular check-ins where we compiled bibliographies from various different sources of kind of collaborative ethnographic methods and oral history work, and yeah, so we kind of create a small group of an interdisciplinary committee, basically.
Okay. I think we can, thank you so much for that, Jacob. And I think that we can just go on for the next paper.
Yeah, which will be you. So I'm going to introduce you. So the next paper is going to be by Veronica Walker Vadillo from the University of Helsinki. And she's going to present on the socio and ecological dimensions of nautical technology, bringing the past and the future. So the floor is yours, Veronica.
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction, Caterina, and thank you everyone for being here. Today I'm going to talk about the socio-ecological dimensions of nautical technology. And so I'm going to focus specifically on the case of Southeast Asia, which is where I usually work. So as items made of wood designed to transgress a watery environment, boats have multifaceted quality that is deeply rooted in nature. And as I will argue in this presentation, a good way to understanding this connection is through ethnography. And while it is true that archaeologists are bounded by the material in our pursuit of knowledge, the study of our maritime past can be enhanced by studying material objects not just as items, but as things that constitute and structure behavior. And the best way to approach this is by tapping into traditional ecological knowledge of living communities. In this presentation, I will discuss the need to apply a socio-ecological approach to study the boats, exploring not just the rituals that surround shipbuilding, but also the way in which we can examine through these practices how humans see the universe. So the way in which boats bridge land and water has secured them a special place in human ideologies, especially for communities that live in close coexistence with watery environment, from marshlands to flooded forest or coastal spaces. When the water features prominently in a culture's worldview, we often see how boats become liminal agents, capable of moving not just between elements, but also between worlds. Boats have the ability to carry fishermen into the ocean, but they can also carry the soul of the deceased into the netherworld. It is this intersection between human and nature where we find ships and boats transform into connecting agents with other than human agency. And these bridge the gap between humans and nature and between the world of the living and the world of the gods. So in Southeast Asia, boats have gained symbolic significance, at least in two different ways: through the personification of boats during the construction process and through metaphors linked to social organization and worldview in both insular and mainland Southeast Asia. In the first case, boats are imbued with other than human agency through construction processes and ritual performance, and their personification is often enhanced through naming, where boat parts are given names of human body parts. In some instances, rituals performed by boat builders liken the construction of a boat to the conception of and birth of a human child. The boat then becomes more than an object. It has the power to view dangers and avoid them, and it can also bring good luck and prosperity to the owner, who is in turn required to perform certain ritual practices and behave appropriately. Boats have further acquired enhanced symbolic meaning through metaphoric associations that are connected both to social organization and worldview. The reproduction of social order on board vessels is clearly visible in mainland Southeast Asia, for example, in the Thai and Angkorean royal barges parades, where the distribution of space within the boats and between boats is clearly hierarchical. But beyond a parallel of societal order, boats are also conceived as liminal agents of the netherworld and are used by several Southeast Asian society as the method of transport for the dead to travel to the other world. And this includes, for example, the existence of coffins that are shaped like the boats. Now, in this presentation, I want to briefly step away from the archaeological material to critically examine social practices surrounding boat building in Southeast Asia from a socio-ecological perspective. Now, this kind of approach aims to enhance our understanding of boats as social entities within this region and explore ways of using this traditional ecological knowledge and the socio-ecological behavior found in the ethnography to contextualize the archaeological material. This approach, strengthened by the Maritime Cultural Landscape Framework, will allow us to tap into boat building practices to understand ritual performances and materialize narratives of local understandings of the world. So what is a socio-ecological approach? This approach, also known as coupled human-natural systems approach, is concerned with the interaction between humans and their environment, understanding these interactions as a complex adaptive systems of human and non-human entities that interact within networks. In this approach, the individual behavior of entities are understood to be interdependent. So entities adapt to changes in their social and ecological environment, and their socio-ecological environment changes as a result from these diverse elements. Even small changes to one of these elements can result in changes to a system, causing entities to adapt to a new environment again. And here I want to introduce you to the concept of dynamic or fluid stability, very well explained by the author of Dune, who recognizes that a system maintains a certain fluid stability that can be destroyed by a misstep in just one niche. A system has order flowing from point to point, and if something dams that flow, then order collapses. So a system is characterized by its ability to absorb and adapt to a certain level of change. Now, systems are continuously changing because that is what complex systems do. So our role as scholars is to understand causes and consequences and use diachronic material, knowing that human societies are entangled in a very complex feedback loop with their environment. Ecological approaches are not new to archaeology, but the field of ecology has given giant leaps forward to shake off deterministic approaches that saw humans as powerless agents at the mercy of nature. This environmental determinism that assumes societies would have behaved similarly under identical environmental circumstances to constraints imposed by nature, was later counteracted by an opposing trend that assumes humans were free from the environment, as nature's had no impact on how societies organize themselves. The truth, as usual, should be found somewhere in the middle ground. And so current approaches in behavioral ecology are more concerned with the complex feedback loop created between humans and nature and explore the nature of the relationship between beliefs and behaviors so that they can be operationalized into a model. So this approach will allow us to contextualize both construction and decision-making processes within social practice of any given culture at any point in time. Now, in the context of maritime archaeological theory, this approach reminds us of John Adams' ships and boats as archaeological source material, like Katarina was showing before. And here he says that the ships were created, so he created this entangled connection between different elements that affect ships at multiple levels, from design to construction to material usage and so on. Like Westerdel's maritime cultural landscape, the idea is to recognize the complexity that lies at the heart of maritime communities and indeed of human cultures altogether. Now, Ian Hodder in archaeology and Tim Ingold in anthropology are just two examples of how academia is trying to tackle the wicked problem of human nature and the interweaving elements that construct the reality that we live in. Now, the socio-ecological approach allows researchers to operationalize models of human behavior through this complex feedback loop that can be applied to any research project dealing with human-nature relations. In Southeast Asia in particular, there is a high level of significance of the supernatural in boat building practices that connect humans to the environment. And this is reflected at the very least in informal institutions that guide the way that boats are built and constrain a certain the way what boats are and how they should look like or how they should be used. And here I'm going to very briefly introduce you to the wonderful world of boat building in Cambodia, which is actually structured in a way that is defined by the Khmer worldview. And this affects boat building in various ways. So the first one is the location. So the Khmer see the world as a dichotomy. So it is divided between the wild forest, where the wild spirits live, and the village, which is the domesticated space where domesticated spirits support the existence of the villagers. So because the boats they need wood to be constructed, the first phase of the boat building happens in the forest. So a specific team of boat builders go to the forest, and there's a set of rules, guidelines, taboos that need to be employed at that time so that the boat can be constructed. Then when the boat is almost finished, it's only just not polished, the boat is transported, and there is a process of introducing this boat into the world of the village. And there a different team comes in and they will finish the boat. So that's one of the ways in which this happens. The other way that affects boat building is the dates of the construction. And I think there was, I think Jacob mentioned it before, it's a little bit similar, where in the Khmer worldview, during the rainy season, the rain is fertilizing the earth. And so everyone retreats. So this is the time when the monks start their Lent. And so it's a time where you have to retreat yourself, and that's not the ideal time when you have to construct the boat. So the construction of boats happen during the dry season. And it also affects the way, the material from which boats are made. So boats are made from the koki tree, the Hopea odorata, which is a type of hardwood, and it's considered to be a sacred tree that has a very strong spirit. And it's only used for boats, for palaces, and for temples, for racing boats, actually, for sacred boats. And the two examples that we have from the Angkor period, so the medieval times of Cambodia, they actually are boats that were made of this kind of wood. And of course, because the kind of wood that it's being used has a specific spiritual attribute, the way that the material is processed has also some constraints to it. And the boats that are made from a single log, they are chiseled. They use adzes and chiseling tools. And from a 13th century account left to us by the Chinese emissary Chou Da-Wan, we know that at the time, the people from Cambodia, the people from Angkor, were using chisels as well. And he decried the use of this technology because he thought that saws were far more economically viable for building boats. So you can see from this narrative that Chou Da-Wan has left us that from two different cultures, the uses of tools are so specific. If you have a value that it's more of an, if you have a view that's more of an economic kind of oriented, then you're going to praise this kind of saws. But if you are not, like the Khmer were, then of course to them the use of saws is just not acceptable. They just know that it exists. They just choose not to use saws. Oh, sorry. So we can use the case of the sauce to further examine the concept of dynamic equilibrium or fluid stability in action. Now, the presence of this type of tool could have become a watershed moment of Khmer boat building practices in the Angkor period, but people's adherence to the way they build boats was strong enough to face the threat imposed by the introduction of a new tool. Social structures had been put in place to ensure best practice, and chiseling has to be seen as an essential to the goal, which is to create a type of boat with other than human agency. So societies are constantly bombarded with things that threaten order, but when the system is resilient, it will revert back to the original order. This is what you see in this double dip graph. However, external stressors may gain momentum and alter the system to a point where it becomes a new system. For those of us who study the past, discovering how these factors become thresholds or tipping points for a change in the system should be a priority. And in Cambodia, we have seen that introducing a clearly more efficient tool was not enough to alter the way boats were being built, and so it continued to use chisels well into the 20th century. However, this is changing through not one, but multiple factors. For example, the introduction of new materials coupled with diminishing forest resources had an impact on boat building. Nowadays, dugouts are only made for the racing boats of the water festival. It is now more common to find boats made of fiberglass in the Tonle Sap Lake, and while wooden boats are also present, they're usually made from planks. The bow and the stern, however, are still chiseled. These are the head and the tail of the boat, so you can see how that technique has taken refuge in the most meaningful sections of the boat. Now, another factor that has gravely affected traditions in general, and boat building practices in particular, is the collapse of the country during the Khmer Rouge period. Now, 20% of the population was wiped out by the Khmer Rouge regime, and countless others were displaced within Cambodia or to foreign lands. And with the death of a substantial portion of the older generation, knowledge on how to conduct rituals and interact with the spirits disappeared. Now, the profound effect that the brutality of the regime had on younger generations and their traditional systems of beliefs is insurmountable. So the structures that supported the existence of traditional boat building practices and allowed them to retain this dynamic stability are now shaken, and a new system is likely emerging. So, to conclude, through the Cambodian example, I have discussed the different ways in which the Khmer embedded knowledge to ensure best practice, and this data is available to us, albeit with certain caveats, through ethnography. Codified in informal and formal structures and institutions, the process of building a boat that far exceeds the techno-functional elements. It is firmly rooted in social practice that connects people to their environment and express local ideas of nature and their relationship to the universe. Through a state of dynamic equilibrium, the socio-ecological system at the core of boat building and usage has been in flux, constantly adapting and absorbing external stressors. As we have seen in the case of the tools, it is not enough to come into contact with a new technology to incorporate it. In fact, it took the Khmer at least more than 8 centuries to adopt the saws, since Chodagwan first reported the use of chiseling for wood processing. Any change in boat design or the way wood is processed should therefore be seen as a possible indicator of a tipping point or threshold that forced a change and resulted in a new socio-ecological system. This gives archaeologists new tools to understand material culture and decision-making processes in past amphibious and maritime cultures that go beyond technology and functionality. Engaging with traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous epistemology should therefore be one of our priorities. And given the impact that climate change will have on coastal communities, it seems imperative that we undertake this research while there is still time. And thank you for your attention.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Veronica, for this really exciting talk. Let's see if anyone has any questions for Veronica. You can write things on the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question directly.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Anyone else wants to go first. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think I've experienced what you're framing as the sociological approach as well in our fieldwork in Greece, and I'm curious more about this understanding of sort of tradition, which for me, tradition has also never been static. It's always been kind of, as you mentioned, evolving and incorporating different inputs over time. And if there is resistance beyond this kind of saw that took over, 7 centuries to incorporate, do you feel like, is it at an inflection point now? Where are you familiar with the kinds of resistance to new methods, materials, and choices that are being made now in traditional boat making there? Because I feel like you mentioned the introduction of fiberglass boats, and I wonder if we look 10, 15, 20 years down the line, do you feel like, is there an openness to traditional boat building culture to try to kind of become sustainable in a certain way? I mean, more financially and operationally, or do you think it's kind of going to take another 7 centuries to incorporate certain technologies that, I'm curious about that.
Now, I'm happy that you noticed the similarities, because when you were giving your presentation, I thought like, yep, I can see that. There's a lot of parallels between what you're doing and what I have been doing in Southeast Asia. There's a lot of different levels in the problems that now the traditional boat building practices are facing in Cambodia. So as I said, at one level, you've got the diminishing wood resources. So if you want to construct a very large boat and you need one single log, you need a very big, you need a really big tree. And that means that with the current deforestation and the amount of wood that's being cut to serve, to be exported, a lot of times illegally, the price of the trees have really gone up. So it's actually really hard to find good, to be able to purchase that kind of logs, even for dugouts that are being made for the race. So when the dry season begins, there is this water festival, and there's a lot of races on the Mekong, and it's a way of celebrating the return of the waters to their normal course. And so at that time, the Buddhist temples, they each have one competing racing boat. Those boats are made from a single log. Still, you can compare, for example, the way that the boats were being built during the Angkor era, which is the medieval times, and you can go to the Thai Royal Barges Museum, and you can see that there has been a diminishing in the knowledge of the local communities to build this kind of really large boats. The ones in Thailand, they are up to 50 meters long, and they can reach up to 3 meters wide with one single log. And you can tell that the craftsmanship is still alive, because they have kept the craftsmanship alive until now. But in Cambodia, their history has not been so kind to them. So they lost a lot of control after the Thai took over. And they actually took away a lot of people who knew, a lot of craftsmen during the sacking of Angkor 1430. So a lot of knowledge was lost at that time. They still make dugouts, but they're not as spectacular as the ones that you would find in other places. So there's already been a loss in that kind of knowledge. I think that nowadays they will retain this kind of knowledge for that kind of sacred tree making, or sacred boat making. But I would say that most of the local boats will not follow the same kind of system. As I say, it's more like the bow on the stern. They still chisel them. I think that there is a retention there, but it's probably just dying, because there will be few and few people who can actually know how to do it, or who can actually afford to do it.
I think we have a question from Kalle.
Yes, hi. Hi, thanks. And thanks, Veronica, for a really interesting paper. I also started thinking about the shift from axis and axis to sewing, which I'm sure also has had this sort of more symbolic or religious, spiritual meanings. But of course, also, as you kind of mentioned, you can build different boats with those tools, as long as you don't have like boats made out of planks, you don't necessarily need the saw. And the boats made out of dugouts using hatches can actually be much stronger. I mean, we see the same here in the north. The first boats are being dugouts, and you would not use a saw for that. Maybe in cutting the trees, but then it comes down to what kind of source you actually have, especially when you have really, really big trees like you sometimes have there on the region you're talking about. So the source might not match the largeness of the trees. But all I'm saying is I totally believe that it's down to symbolism, but it could also have quite a practical reason, if you catch my drift. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I mean about structures that ensure that best practice is kept alive. I think I know exactly where you're coming from, because so when you chisel a tree, the tree doesn't, like the tree doesn't break the fibers, so the torsion force, like, so the boat is better suited to withstand torsion forces. I know even the Vikings did also, they chiseled their planks as well. So it is actually a really good way of managing the boat. But it is true that if you're doing a dugout, then you're constrained by the size of the boat, of the tree that you're working with. So of course there's some limitations to the kind of watercraft that you can do. And I think that at some point you may break away from that and start doing some plankings, but that should be seen as a change of way of thinking, perhaps. So there's a lot of reasons why culture would change, but yeah, definitely it's there's a lot of different factors, and one of them is the way, like the result that you get from that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any other questions that we have for Veronica? No. In that case, maybe we can move on to the next paper.
Yeah, so we have now Elena Perez-Alvaro from Nelson Mandela University, and she's going to talk about women underwater, Aboriginal women and diving intelligence. So,
hello, thank you, Veronica.
Yeah.
So, hello everyone. My name is Elena Perez-Alvaro, and my field of expertise is underwater cultural heritage. I am the last one to speak today, so I am sure you are all tired, so I will try to be brief. The title of my presentation today is Women Underwater, Aboriginal Women and Diving Intelligence. This presentation may seem to be far away from what we have originally been understanding as underwater cultural heritage. However, I believe underwater cultural heritage can be understood in a more integral way. This is exactly the idea I want you to take from me today. The concept of an integral heritage, no natural heritage, no cultural heritage, no tangible heritage or intangible heritage, but integral, where our memory, society, culture, past, nature, religion, power, adaptation, people, and future can be preserved together. Many of the presentations today have already approached this idea, which is basically the anthropological point of view of the heritage. So in order to illustrate this idea better, I would like to tell you a story. It is the story of Black Virgin. This is the name given to the 19th century practice of coercion, tricking or kidnapping Aboriginal women and transporting them far away to live a life of servitude and harsh conditions in islands close to Australia. Many of the indigenous women were pressed into diving for pearls, since it was thought that women had the lung capacity to stay underwater for longer. Some women were made to dive to big depths, with stones tied to their legs to keep them down, even while pregnant. Many of them drowned. Some other times, their pearl luggers shipwrecked. Today, there is little research on these female divers or the shipwrecks. It has been a story that has been tried to be forgotten. However, the scars from that trait in human lives, which continue for nearly a century, remain to this day. On islands such as Tanna, locals still avoid the beaches, remembering the theft of their young women generations earlier. As I understand it, if these women were diving for pearls for more than 100 years, they hold a unique information about the oceans. Many of you may have heard about the sea nomads or the Banhao, a community that can stay underwater for as long as 13 minutes at depths of around 200 feet. It has been discovered that their spleen is bigger than those of any other person. Natural selection has helped them to develop the genetic advantage. In my opinion, these people have to know their coast and underwater cultural heritage and natural heritage much better than any researcher spending 3 months a year in those parts of the oceans. The truth is that many indigenous women have been living in the coast and diving for pearls, seaweeds, shellfish, sea urchins, lobsters, sea cucumber, oyster, octopus, and abalone for centuries. These women have witnessed coastal erosion, change in currents, warming of the seas, variation in fishing stocks, biodiversity loss, or historical shipwrecks. All the information that all these women hold is essential information for governments. Data from marine exploration affects national defense sensitivity because it may uncover military security information, safety issues, environmental concerns, cultural evidence, or food security clues. Government fund and support scientific research in marine exploration to advance knowledge in various fields, from biology to geology. This information is crucial for sustainable resource management. However, the data that these indigenous women can offer based on centuries of living close and in the sea is mostly forgotten. However, I want to show you an example where indigenous knowledge is being used to protect the underwater cultural and natural heritage. In Spain, a new law has been recently drafted to protect the Mar Menor, a salted lagoon in the south of Spain. This lagoon has been recognized as a living entity based on indigenous practices where nature has legal personhood and rights. So now the lagoon has the right to flow or the right to sue. These are examples of the fights of indigenous community to protect their lakes and rivers in this direction. This means that Spain, although Spain holds indigenous communities per se, have approved a new law to protect its natural and cultural heritage following indigenous communities' beliefs and traditions. This is in a national level, but at international level, the knowledge of indigenous communities should also have a high impact for the knowledge that they can offer to climate changes in the oceans, and marine knowledge. For instance, listening to these communities is aligned with the science policy platform of the United Nations of working with indigenous and local knowledge to offer solutions to environmental challenges. The importance of this approach is also reflected in the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goal 5, promoting national and international efforts towards gender equality and women's empowerment, and Goal 14, conserve and sustainable use of the oceans, sea, and marine resources for sustainable development. This approach is also aligned with the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, the science we need for the ocean we want, whose main mission is using transformative ocean science solutions for sustainable development, connecting people and our ocean. What is more, this has an impact on the United Nations Women, Peace and Security Agenda, involving women in oceans governance strategies, highlighting the role of indigenous women for environmental security and promoting indigenous women direct participation in ocean management decisions. So I believe the impact of this knowledge is quite important. Underwater cultural heritage allows us to learn about past civilization, trade routes, maritime technology, and environmental changes. With the concept of integrality, the concept is not limited to tangible objects, but is a holistic concept that involves the entire cultural legacy of a group of people or a society. Integral underwater heritage is comprehensive and encompasses all aspects, not only physical artifacts and historical sites, but also intangible elements such as tradition, customs, language, folklore, and cultural practices. I believe that it is necessary to understand that as custodians and teachers of significant traditional knowledge, indigenous communities bring a unique strength and insight to the management of the oceans, and essential information about our underwater cultural and natural heritage. Indigenous communities living close to the oceans have been experimenting ocean changes for centuries. The information they hold, based on a close relationship with the oceans, has the potential to be transformed into knowledge to improve action in issues related to all these environmental emergencies we are facing. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Elena. That was very nice. So does anyone from the audience have any questions? Okay, Jacob?
Hi, thank you. I was wondering, because you kind of expanded a bit on the legal dimensions of your work, and it's something that I think in the context of underwater heritage, I was wondering this the Mar Menor example and these kinds of the legal rights of non-humans, is that something that you see as a possible, like actually like legally and legislatively as a path forward to explore for protection of environmental sites in the future? Is it, do you see it as a kind of a standalone example, or is it something that actually in Europe or elsewhere could be fought for and adopted?
The truth is that in Spain, it is more a statement, an impact statement than anything else. It doesn't really have at the moment legal implications because it is really complicated. It has been approved, but nobody really knows how to apply it really. It has happened already in Canada, for instance. It's not the first example. There has been many other examples. But I believe that it has to work. It's going to work better in those countries where that are very familiarized with indigenous communities and their rights and their wishes and their legal, let's say legal aspect of it, because otherwise I don't think it's going to be completely well understood. I mean, it's perfect as to make an impact, but in a legal perspective, I think it's more complicated than what it seems.
Thank you.
If I can add to that, I think that just this year there was an ERC starting grant that was awarded to Visa Koki here at the University of Helsinki, and he's going to start to develop a general theory of legal agency, which actually tells about this. He's using several examples of like legal agency and how that can be applied to law. So there is some work working on that. There is some work being done in that direction. Whether that is feasible, does it work? Let's see. I think Katarina had a question. I saw you raising your own hand.
Yes, I did. So I was wondering, how do the women, like various Aboriginal women, and if you've worked with any community specifically, how do they feel about the fact that they do have the diving intelligence? And the reason I'm asking is, in Samos, when I was doing the interviews, I came across some women who are basically family members of the shipbuilders that help quite a lot and do actual shipbuilding, but they do not consider themselves as shipbuilders or carriers of this knowledge, which is something that I want to explore in the future. But I found it very odd that they do proper shipbuilding work, but they are not quite considered as carriers of this knowledge. So I was wondering how, if you've had any interactions with specific women in communities, Aboriginal communities, that and how they feel about this diving intelligence that they carry.
So in the university, Nelson Mandela University in South Africa, we have been working with indigenous communities living in the coast. Some of them were women who were diving, and they don't realize of the high potential that they hold, I would say. However, we invited them in one of the symposiums that we had, the researchers, we had a symposium there about also the sea and the cultural heritage, and they were there. They came, And it was really fun because the researchers, we were basically talking about them, and they were there, and suddenly they will stand up and they will say, yeah, because my grandmother told me about this. And I thought, I mean, it was an amazing experience because they were in that moment realizing how important the knowledge was for researchers and for the impact that they have in international agendas, really. So it was really nice, yeah. But they didn't realize until we didn't invite them, for instance, to share it with us.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
Anyone else has any other questions or comments? I want to ask Elena about these century-old traditions. So before that, they weren't diving. Is it this like a late introduction?
Sorry, say again?
I think that you mentioned that they had been diving for 100 years.
No, well, what I said is that because they have been diving for hundreds of years, for thousands of years,
okay, plural,
yeah,
yes.
they hold a knowledge that that none of us, and even if it is not just diving, if it's just being there, I think that still they know much more than what we could sometimes as researchers guess in just 3 years of work, I would say.
No, absolutely. And I misunderstood you. I thought that they had just been like, it was kind of like a late introduction, so that they were diving for pearls for a shorter period of time. It was not like a long-standing tradition to dive. But yeah, now that everything makes far more sense now. Okay. Any other questions? No? If so, well, thank you so much, Jake. Oh, yeah, Elena has one. Okay, that she's writing because she doesn't have a mic. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Tokaya. I loved your work. Congratulations. I've been working in South America trying to find women in relation to boating and sailing. Is there a relation between these women divers and boating, sailing?
Yes, there is. And I'm going to start in the next, next year, I'm going to start a research in the Isle of Guam. And it seems like it is really connected, those like diving and boating and sailing, navigating and all of that. So my research in there is going to be how these women hold this knowledge both as divers and both and as navigators, and how they understand this knowledge, basically. So yes, basically it's really related, and it will be great to share it with you when I get a little bit farther for the research.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you, Elena and Jacob, for your presentations. And I'm going to turn the mic to Katarina for the final remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Veronica, for chairing the session. Now we have around half an hour where me and Victoria wanted to invite everyone into a short discussion, basically, about the future of archaeology and maritime archaeology within the climate emergency, and what is basically required for us to do, and what problems we've been facing, and what we would like to see for the support of our work. In the website, we had some questions, and we had asked people if they want to keep notes on that so that they can participate. This is for everyone to participate. So I'll just start by saying that in all of the talks that we had today, I noticed some patterns of things that have been going on. For example, a lot of us have noticed that there's a huge gaps in the knowledge that we have of various subjects, either the impacts on maritime heritage and underwater and coastal heritage, but also gaps in the knowledge of what local and indigenous knowledge can offer. Also, a lot of us have noticed that there is problems with government support. There is a lot of potential with participating communities, and also there's quite an importance in looking at diachronic perspectives. And I ask you all to fill in that Mentimeter, and I'll just share my screen real quick. So the first question that we had was what are the main problems facing maritime archaeology within the climate emergency? And for example, lack of funding appears to be quite important, and it has appeared in a couple of notes. Other climate change effects, such as floods and droughts, storms are also appearing there. Disappearance of sites, exposure of sites, losing information, policy not supporting are all basically in that. And also, if I can change this, yeah, the other question was what are the tools to use for the future? And again, you can see that transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity has been appearing, engagement, ethnography, other digital tools such as 3D recording and photogrammetry, oral traditions. So it's a quite mixture of things. So I don't want to keep talking. I just wanted to show all of these things to you because this is all the thoughts that we have. Yeah, I would like to give the word to anyone who might have a comment on these questions that we had said. And Victoria, if you want to like take over from me, and anyone else can join in.
I start. So I think it's very interesting the words that we were showing us in the Mentimeter, because I think it's very of the things that we've been seeing to the different presentation of today. And so I think the lack of funding is something that everybody have mentioned already. And also I like to see that there is a lot of words related to the community and how we have to involve the community into this, like citizen science, and I see a couple of them in the Mentimeter that you were showing us. And so I don't know if anyone has any other comments, or we should maybe move to the next question or something.
Yeah, does anyone have any comments of how they feel about the future, what we can do, what we need? And especially we had all this focus on early career researchers because we feel that sometimes there's not enough support or even like time to do such research. So we're just wondering how people feel. Veronica, go ahead.
If I may, then.
Yeah, of course.
Well, picking up from the last session, I think, and of course, I mean, I'm biased, absolutely biased. I'll say this out loud. But the fact is that, you know, one of the main issues that I find is the problem of disappearing traditions. And there's many reasons why traditions may disappear. But I think that a lot of times we will still find archaeological remains, but finding people who know how to do things, it's harder, especially because a lot of these communities have this kind of, what's it called, situated condition where actually practice is what determines their learning. And so a lot of times this kind of knowledge is not written down, it's something that is passed on orally. So losing that is actually what I think would be a total tragedy, because that cannot be reproduced, and archaeological material is very limited. When it comes to that kind of knowledge, we just don't have it. So having that kind of material should be one of our priorities, to actually go out, engage with local communities, see what they have to say about what we're working, and being more proactive about reaching out to them in various forms, like we've seen before with the projects that they have in Colombia, of talking to them about what they think about their own maritime heritage, where they live, and things like that. That kind of, like, you know, close contact knowledge, it's key for us, and we should recognize it as a valuable asset and something that needs to be preserved in various ways. So doing a little bit more of an effort in recognizing the value and also recording that information should be one of our priorities. Yes.
Thank you. That's very important. Anyone else having any comments?
Yes, me. Well, I think it was so interesting, this presentation, because we connect some maybe similar ideas. For example, the work of the community, the technology, the documented. So I think we have to connect these ideas, no? Because for me, it's important. Okay, yes, we work with the community, but we need to document all this heritage with this new technology. And maybe this opportunity to catch the heritage, how is it in this moment, because maybe in the future is the other reality, but we connect with monitoring this for these years to recollect this information, but involve with the community. So we have to connect the technology, maybe the technical terms to understand what happened, but involved with the traditions, because maybe disappear, but maybe it's not a problem, these objects, no? It's maybe a tools for work and a tools for the young people, and maybe to connect this approach with academic, maybe it's a solution, yes, for this problem, because maybe disappear, but maybe we have this technology to yes, to document this moment.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's we have the tools. Anyone else?
Yes, just to say that I think one has been made a couple of times. It's so much for climate change, the focus seems to be on the natural environment. And I think some of the problems we have is like demonstrating that some of these sites like shipwrecks can actually contribute. So part of, this is one of the reasons for doing that kind of the work on the marine species in Wales, basically to show that these sites can actually inform what's going on about the natural environment. So I think we still have a bit of an uphill battle just to, with all the main messages in climate change, it's still to get heritage in there as a contributing equal, to the wider debate and the wider sort of data gathering. So I'd say.
Yeah, totally. Like I think heritage should be recognized as an equal partner, an equal factor to be considered. And it's I think that's why we wanted to do this symposium, to just show basically the potential, but also just network and know each other so that we can support each other's efforts in this process that we will have in front of us too with climate change. Anyone else having any comments or even questions or anything you might want to add? Nothing? Okay. I think it's been also a long day, so if there's no other comments or questions, we would like to thank you all for your participation. It has been very interesting and really exciting to see all this work from all around the world, basically, been presented today. We will plan to keep in touch because, as I said, we wanted this symposium to be also a networking event so that we know what people are doing, where they are, what they have been using in terms of technologies, methodologies, but also funding and what potential exists. So please be in touch, and yeah, we hope to see you in a different event, and we will keep you informed for any news we have. Victoria, do you want to say a few words before we close?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody, the conferences, and also the people that are just participating and asking questions, because this has been a really enriching day. I think we have a lot of different topics, different parts of the world, and we can actually build a network if we want to keep going this, because has been very good, and I think I learned a lot from all of you.
Okay, and as a last thing before we close, Veronica reminded me that we will be organizing soon in the winter, right, Veronica? In early winter. We cannot hear you. Sorry.
Always happens. Sorry. I think it's the 8th of January, so the second Monday of January. Yes.
Yeah, we'll be organizing a talk on basically funding opportunities and funding applications, because we have been working, both of us, quite a lot on various applications and efforts. We would like just to share our experience basically, and what opportunities exist, how to work on them, and how to go about like this sort of funding space that we have. So yeah, it would be great to see you all there. Down by the Water is a platform that we already have, and we have seminars every month. So you can find the Down by the Water on Facebook and also on the website of the University of Helsinki, and you can find out about the event, which will happen in January. So thank you everyone again for being here. And as we said, we'll be in touch and we'll try to make sure everyone knows what everyone is doing. So, thank you.
Yeah, and just before we go, maybe I would like to propose if some of you can open your camera so we can take a picture of like the final picture of the congress.
That's a good idea.
Okay, so thank you so much. Like 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mhm.